people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. So look at the boxing schedule in the coming month of January. That is normally a slow month in the sport of boxing. You don't usually have too much going on at the start of the calendar year, where this year is fully loaded. Amanda Serrano is going to kick it off with her upcoming fight against Reina Tellez in the first week of January. In the second, we're going to be seeing unbeaten Nagit Kabayel have his homecoming fight against Damian Neba in what is a Queensbury promotion show that likely will go down in the afternoon as a lead-in to what is supposed to be the Subriel Matias versus Dalton Smith mandated title fight that I'm told tickets aren't selling well. Still a mystery why a small local promotional outfit with no broadcast partner would stake that much of their own money to win the rights for a fight that a bigger promoter could have easily promoted. Fresh Productions staked approximately $1.9 million of their own money at the purse bid, beating out Matchroom and, in effect, bearing all the risk for this show if it doesn't do well. But it's going down January 10th. Later on in the month, on the 23rd, Zuffa Boxing is set to launch, and there's been a whole lot of chatter about who's going to be on that card. It's going down on a Friday, so that following Saturday, unbeaten Moses Itelma is going to be taking on Jermaine Franklin in what is a Queensbury promotion show that services as a lead-in to the Andy Cruz versus Raymond Muratalla mandated title fight. That's going to be a busy weekend. Notice that the people at Zuffa Boxing were wise to schedule their card on a Friday as to not clash with all the action on a Saturday. There may be a lot of chatter around the brand and how things are going to be, what they're going to look like, but they're not yet in a place where they want to go head-to-head with the established game in town. Nor should they. For what seems to be an updated version of Friday night fights, just with a bigger budget, a bigger megaphone, and more brand power, I'm very curious to see what that launch is going to look like the following weekend on the 31st. That Saturday afternoon in the United Kingdom, Bakram Murtazaliev will be defending his IBF title against Josh Kelly in a fight that took many months to make, and it took for Matchroom to get involved. Because they originally weren't. The fight was supposed to be put together between Main Events, who promotes Bakram Murtazaliev, and Vazerman, who was promoting Josh Kelly. They couldn't make it happen on their own. Matchroom had to intervene. I believe that Josh Kelly has entered into some kind of new promotional deal with them. Having been promoted by them before, some years ago, it looks like they're promoting him again some years later. That's in the afternoon, servicing as a lead-in to the Teofimo Lopez versus Shakur Stevenson Ring Magazine card that same day. But not only that, Xander Zayas is supposed to be unifying titles with Abbas Baru that same night at that same time. Those two cards are going to be going head-to-head. One card has considerably more brand power than the other. That is the Ring Magazine card, but that Ring Magazine card is behind a paywall. That's a pay-per-view, and we don't yet know if the Zayas versus Baru fight is also being billed as a pay-per-view, because if it is, well, that's not good. That doesn't bode well for that card. We don't yet know if it's going to be a pay-per-view. We don't yet know where we're supposed to watch it. Tubi, maybe? In the subsequent months that have followed Top Rank's departure from the ESPN platform, the only news we've seen semblant of a new broadcast deal is a fast channel on Tubi that shows a lot of old fights and some smaller ones via Top Rank, like Mayer versus Spencer, Rafael Espinoza's last fight south of the border. Hardly a substitute for the budget and the branding that they were getting on ESPN. As the year turns, more and more attention is going to what's happening with Top Rank, what's going to happen, or what isn't, Are they going to find a new broadcast partner or not? They announced the Zayas versus Baru fight some weeks ago. Feels like some months. And they put that fight together in a timely fashion. That's a unification match between two reigning champions, one of which they're heavily invested in. So have they already found a new broadcast partner and they're just waiting to announce it? Because Xander Zayas is a guy they're heavily invested in. That is a top-ranked show. They're the ones who paid for it. They're the ones who put it all together. Is that how Top Rank is going to kick off a new broadcast deal with a new broadcaster? Questions that need answers, that still need answers, here at year's end. But that's what the January schedule is going to look like, and there also is a lot on the schedule for the month of February. As stated, usually at the start of the year, there's not a whole lot going on. So this is a noticeable difference from previous years. In February, we can expect to see Ryan Garcia versus Mario Barrios, Wood versus Warrington 2, and Navarrete versus Nunez. Just to name a few, it looks like the people in boxing mean to hit the ground running in the coming calendar year, and I'm very excited. Now back over to what is supposed to be the launch of Zuffa Boxing next month. It's being reported that Sergey Boachuk will be taking on Radzov Butaev to kick off the launch of the fledgling promotional outfit. It was originally reported that Vito Milnicki would be fighting under the Zuffa banner, but earlier today, there was a separate story that he signed a promotional pact with Samson Lukowicz, and I can't say I think that was a good move for the up-and-comer, though that's the story. Now, Sergey Boachuk is still coming off the loss to Brandon Adams earlier this year in what was their rematch, where Radzov Butaev has been quietly rebuilding himself the last 2 years. The last time we saw him was with a then unbeaten Eimantas Stanionis, where he dropped a decision. Since then, that was in April of 2022, more than 3 years ago. He subsequently returned to action in November of 2023, racking up a win against the guy whose name I can't pronounce, sat out all of 2024, came back in November of 2025 against Artem Pugach, won a decision. Both fights were fought within the junior middleweight limit. And from what I remember of Radzov Butaev, he's a bit of an action guy and a bit of a dirty guy, a bit of a dirty boxer with some roughhouse tactics. He's also a bit of a switch hitter, fighting orthodox, fighting southpaw. From what I remember, we all know that Sergey Boachuk, he's definitely an action guy. He's a pressure guy, a come-forward pressure fighter. So a fight between them makes for an all-action shootout. But with names like these, can Zuffa Boxing be successful? The stable looks a lot like what I expected it to look like. Fringe contenders, hot potatoes, and boxing castaways. Some fighters that are more trouble than they're worth to the big names. Some other fighters who have already suffered losses and are on the bounce, like Sergey Boachuk, like Rayo Valenzuela, who's being funneled over there by his trainer and manager, Robert Garcia. Industry rumors suggest that Rayo will not be the only one of Robert's fighters fighting under the Zuffa Boxing banner, though can you really be successful with a stable that looks like this? It was Front Row Brian who said, "Boxing promoters only extract value, never contribute, until now. Dana and Nick Khan are building a sustainable model that will provide full-time incomes to approximately 600 to 800 boxers once fully scaled up." The original number they were shooting for was half that, 400 to 450 boxers. I'm assuming that Front Row Brian's guesstimate is further down the line, once the brand has gained some traction, though as stated, you look at the stable and the kind of fighters that are going to be over there, the names, and you ask yourself, can they really be successful with these guys? They're doing things differently from the other game in town, the established promoters. They're not resting their laurels on any one or some fighter's name value, same way that traditional promoters do, building a card around a fighter or some fighters that can sell some tickets instead. The strength of Zuffa will be in its infrastructure to spark sustainability, which you don't often see
in this industry. More often than not, promoters are bleeding red ink.
Attempting to satisfy the financial demands of fighters and their teams while trying to drive numbers for a platform, one usually comes at the expense of the other. The operational costs are so high, you can barely turn over a profit. You'll be lucky if you can break even. And that doesn't even speak to whether or not an event actually brought viewers to a platform, since that's what these broadcasters are after. When they go into business with a promoter and give them an annual budget, it's in the hopes that their content, their boxing matches, will bring viewers to their network. They're not giving a boxing promoter a budget for no reason.
So if you've seen a good number of networks withdraw from the boxing space, it's because the operational costs are too high and the return just isn't worth it. And what is a fragmented, unstable industry where no one promoter holds all the cards or has all the contracts.
Thus, no single promoter can afford to operate as an island, though some try to, at the expense of the broadcaster's money and at the expense of the boxing fans' interest.
But if that's true, how can Zuffa sustain, since they're not going to be working with the other promoters and the sanctioning bodies and the powers that be? They're trying to be an island, a bubble.
How's this supposed to work?
As stated, I believe that one of Zuffa's strengths will be its infrastructure. They're doing boxing, but they're doing boxing on a budget. So you won't see the uncontrolled spending that you saw from the PBC years ago upon their inception, when they had all that Waddle and Reed money burning through cash, getting very little done in the process. You won't see the inflated purses that you saw at Top Rank, whereas Shakur Stevenson is getting $3 million plus per fight to bore customers per his exclusivity deal. Where Zuffa will be different is they're going to control the spending.
You ain't gonna have a single guy on there making $3 and $4 million per fight for what may or may not be good-looking fights, decent fights. You can tell just by who they're bringing over. These are not the kind of fighters that cost that much to keep active.
In tandem with clever matchmaking to put together exciting, fan-friendly fights that are easy to digest, Zuffa's strength will be their infrastructure. Borrowing some ideas from the UFC, where the endorsements and brand deals don't go to the individual fighter, they go to the UFC brand. I believe that's how it's going to be at Zuffa, which will operate as a safety net that keeps them in the black. They don't have it all riding on one or some fighters who may or may not sell some tickets.
What they're shooting for is sustainability, and Paramount Plus must believe in their vision, since they were already in boxing via Showtime, and they decided to drop that content.
The decision to phase out PBC from the Showtime platform came from Paramount, who we thought was all but done with boxing up until this news broke. Apparently, they wanted to stay in the sport, just under different circumstances.
And where Zuffa will be different from the PBC and most everyone else is the infrastructure. They want it to be a self-sustaining bubble that drives numbers and keeps operational costs under control.
Now, whether or not they'll be able to drive numbers with what they've got is a separate matter.
We'll see, but they've got people's attention, and that attention may coax their curiosity to at least give them a look to see what they've got. Finally, the ongoing story that I'm sure most of you have heard about by now. Anthony Joshua survives deadly car crash in Nigeria where 2 were killed.
I heard about it early this morning while I was at the gym.
The Lexus SUV carrying the former heavyweight world champion collided with a stationary truck shortly after 11 a.m., leaving the vehicle badly damaged and Joshua dazed but conscious. A video posted by World Boxing News of the aftermath has shocked social media. Eyewitnesses described a chaotic scene. Joshua was seated behind the driver with a passenger beside him and another in the front seat. Security personnel in a following vehicle immediately assisted, directing passing motorists to help stabilize the wreckage, and it was a bad one.
The entire front of that Lexus SUV was mangled.
One witness said it was terrifying. I helped get people out of the wreckage before the authorities arrived. Joshua was conscious, but visibly shaken. Eddie Hearn, Joshua's promoter, commented from a family holiday to Daily Mail, I awoke to the news of this incident. I think most people did, but got to breathe a sigh of relief as the story was developing that Anthony was all right. He didn't suffer any major injuries, but there were 2 fatalities. We were trying to contact Anthony, and in the meantime, we don't want to speculate on how he is, but thankfully, he appears okay from what I've seen in the images. We are awaiting more information on what has happened, and will update in due course. Hours before the crash, Joshua shared an Instagram story showing him playing table tennis with his personal trainer, Lats, captioned, "Healthy mindset dishing out table tennis smoke." The clip shows how high-spirited he was before the incident. Chris Eubank Jr. confirmed Lats, AJ's personal trainer who went everywhere with the Briton, died, while the other victim was his fitness coach, Cena, who was seen working with him at the Jake Paul fight. Both have since been publicly mourned on social media, with fans and peers posting tributes. Joshua traveled to Nigeria after his 6th-round knockout of YouTuber Jake Paul in Miami earlier this month. He is scheduled to fight in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in February, continuing his return to the ring after a brief hiatus. Fans worldwide reacted with shock and relief, posting messages wishing Joshua a full recovery, while mourning the lives lost. Verified social media accounts highlighted both the tragedy and the boxer's fortunate survival.
Well, it's because of where he was sitting. He was in the back seat behind the driver, where the brunt of the impact tore through the front of the car, tragically claiming the lives of Lats and Cena, who were more than just employees and more than just guys that worked with Anthony. These guys were close. So you can imagine how traumatic this is for Anthony, having a near-death experience that resulted in the death of 2 of his compatriots. Needless to say that this incident likely hampers efforts to bring Anthony back as soon as February. They say that he didn't suffer any major injuries, but he appeared to be in pain as he was being removed from the wreckage. Any sprains or strains would not be visible on the surface, and if nothing else, the psychological damage that Anthony needs time to process this and mourn his friends.
So I don't get the sense he'll be back in the month of February. If I had to guess, he'll probably come back in late March at the earliest. Boxing is not what's on his mind right now.
And that's if there are no injuries. We don't know yet. This is still a developing story, and another tragic reminder of just how fragile life is. A lot can change in an instant.
It's all very unfortunate. Prayers to the families of both Lats and Cena, who unfortunately did not survive this incident.